He had just enough money to save one dream. A movie about grief and rebirth, or a motorcycle that could change the industry forever. Keanu Reeves sat alone in a quiet cafe, staring at numbers that refused to give him peace. Then, an elderly stranger placed a weathered leather bag on the table beside him and said, "I worked with Kurosawa. I think I can help." Welcome to Motivation for Success, the place where quiet moments spark extraordinary stories. Today's story isn't about fame or fortune. It's about purpose. About the choices that define us, especially when they cost everything. So ask yourself, if you had to save just one dream, which would you choose? Now, let's step back to where it all began. When Keanu Reeves sat alone at Groundwork Coffee in Silver Lake on a crisp October morning in 2012, he faced an impossible choice. His two passion projects, the indie film Arc and his motorcycle company Arch, were both teetering on the edge of collapse. He had only enough personal funds left to rescue one endeavor, not both. His dreams of creating meaningful cinema and revolutionary motorcycles were slipping through his fingers. For 2 hours, he stared at financial reports spread across the wooden table, searching for a solution that simply didn't exist. The numbers wouldn't lie, no matter how many times he recalculated them. Then, as the morning crowd thinned, an elderly Japanese man with a weathered leather messenger bag took a seat at the adjacent table. If you had just enough to save one dream, what would you choose? Comment 1 for Arc, 2 for Arch. The stranger recognized Keanu and, after a moment's hesitation, asked to join him. This mysterious visitor claimed to have worked with legendary filmmaker Akira Kurosawa and carried old photographs, script annotations, and a small, worn black notebook filled with cinematic wisdom. What he shared that day would transform everything for Keanu's creative ventures and raise questions Keanu would never fully answer. Keanu sat at his corner table, the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee filling the air. Outside, the autumn sunlight bathed Los Angeles in a golden glow, but Keanu couldn't appreciate it. Dark shadows hung beneath his eyes, evidence of countless sleepless nights. The cafe hummed with the ordinary rhythms of daily life, students tapping away on laptops, friends sharing quiet conversations, a couple stealing glances at each other over steaming mugs. Everyone seemed so carefree, so unburdened. Keanu examined the stack of documents before him, spreadsheets, projections, and reports that all conveyed the same devastating message: his passions were dying. He rubbed his tired eyes and took another sip of his black coffee. The bitterness matched his mood. 8 years earlier, he had received a substantial payout from The Matrix trilogy. He could have purchased a sprawling estate and lived comfortably, focusing only on mainstream acting roles. Instead, he had channeled a significant portion of his earnings into two wildly different dreams: independent filmmaking that explored philosophical themes, and a motorcycle company creating custom bikes unlike anything on the market. Now both ventures were collapsing beneath financial strain. Arc Productions was hemorrhaging money. The film, a deeply personal project exploring themes of loss and rebirth, was behind schedule. Each time they resolved one creative challenge, 3 more emerged. The investors were growing impatient with delays. The project was costing substantially more than initially projected. An Arch motorcycle company that was even more precarious. 3 prototype designs, 3 mechanical failures. The revolutionary engine design hadn't performed as expected during testing. All that innovation, all that investment, evaporating with each unsuccessful trial. "Mr. Reeves, can I bring you another coffee?" asked a friendly barista. Keanu looked up, pulled from his dark contemplation. "Yes, please. The darkest you have." He needed clarity. By tomorrow, he would have to make an impossible decision. He had approximately $5 million of personal funds remaining, not nearly enough to salvage both ventures. He would need to choose, arc or arch? Which dream would survive and which would fade away? Outside the cafe window, a stunning custom motorcycle roared past, not one of his designs, but reminiscent of what Arch was trying to create. It represented a future where motorcycles weren't just transportation but moving sculptures, perfect marriages of form and function. If Arch failed, the motorcycle industry would continue producing conventional machines. They would point to his failure as evidence that innovation in motorcycle design was commercially unviable. Keanu flipped through the ARC production documents. The final week of filming was approaching. The team had addressed issues from previous scenes. They were so close to completing principal photography. If ARC collapsed, the footage would likely be shelved indefinitely. The message of human resilience and transformation he desperately wanted to share with the world would never reach its audience. How do you choose between two visions that both deserve existence? The burden felt overwhelming. Dozens of talented craftspeople worked at his company's gifted cinematographers, designers, engineers, and fabricators. They had families, mortgages, children in college. They had trusted him with their livelihoods, just as his investors had trusted him with millions. His phone vibrated. Another message from the ARC set another problem with a key scene. Keanu placed the phone face down. He couldn't handle another crisis right now. His personal life offered no refuge from these pressures. Years after the tragic loss of his daughter and his girlfriend Jennifer Syme, he remained guarded in relationships. The few friends who truly understood him worried about his total immersion in these struggling ventures. When was the last time he had simply relaxed, attended a social gathering, or taken a vacation? He couldn't remember. The barista brought his second coffee. "You look like you're carrying the whole world today," she said with genuine concern. Keanu attempted to smile. "Something like that. Well, my grandmother always says even the darkest problems look manageable after a good cup of coffee." "I hope she's right," Keanu replied softly, though he didn't believe it. No amount of caffeine could resolve this dilemma. He opened his laptop and examined the Arch budget again. If he reduced staff, closed the secondary workshop, and concentrated everything on refining the current prototype, perhaps they could survive another few months. But without a successful demonstration for potential investors soon, the company would collapse. Next, he reviewed the ARC production schedule. The filming location in Northern California was proving problematic. They needed to reshoot several key scenes. Each day on set was costing nearly twice what they had budgeted. Outside, shadows lengthened as afternoon progressed. Keanu had been sitting there for almost 2 hours yet was no closer to an answer. Patrons came and went. A college student asked if she could borrow the empty chair at his table for her study group. Keanu nodded, barely registering her presence. He thought about his childhood in Toronto, losing himself in films late into the night. Stories about brave individuals finding meaning in a chaotic world. Stories about creating beauty amidst adversity. Those narratives had seemed so attainable then. Now he understood how challenging bringing meaningful art into the world really was. It wasn't just about having compelling visions, it was about battling through countless obstacles day after day. It was about making impossible choices when there were no good options. His coffee grew cold as minutes turned to hours. The cafe quieted as the afternoon crowd dispersed. Keanu contemplated the creative pioneers who had inspired him throughout his life, artists who had persevered against tremendous odds. Kurosawa had mortgaged his home to finance Rashomon after studios rejected it. Steve McQueen had struggled for years to bring Le Mans to the screen, fighting studio interference at every turn. But they hadn't risked everything quite the way he had. They hadn't placed their last resources on the line. "One more hour," he whispered to himself. "One more hour to think." Then I must decide. He stared at the numbers again, willing them to reveal a solution that had eluded him. There had to be an answer. There had to be a way to preserve both visions. He just couldn't see it yet. The cafe door opened, allowing in a gentle breeze. Keanu didn't look up. He was lost in calculations, moving figures from column to column, trying to make the mathematics work out differently. He didn't notice the elderly Japanese man with a weathered leather messenger bag who had just entered. He didn't see how the man's eyes brightened in recognition, or how he deliberately selected the table adjacent to Keanu's. He didn't realize that the next 2 hours would change everything. The elderly man settled at the neighboring table. He ordered a simple green tea and opened the worn leather messenger bag that had clearly served him for decades. The man appeared to be in his early 80s, with silver hair and deep lines etched around his eyes, testament to a lifetime of expressive emotion. His hands showed age spots but remained remarkably steady as he arranged several papers before him. Keanu didn't initially notice him, too absorbed in his financial dilemma, attempting to find resources where none existed. But gradually, he sensed the peculiar feeling of being observed. He glanced up and caught the old man quickly averting his gaze. Keanu returned to his work, but the sensation persisted. The next time he looked up, the old man was undeniably watching him. There was something unusual about his attention, not the typical, "Is that Keanu Reeves?" recognition that he occasionally experienced in public. This felt more purposeful, more knowing. Keanu shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't in the right frame of mind for fans or critics today. He needed to concentrate. The old man continued stealing glances. Finally, after 15 minutes of this silent exchange, he spoke. His voice carried a distinct Japanese accent. "You are the storyteller, yes?" Keanu looked up, surprised. Most people recognized him from The Matrix or Speed. Few identified him primarily as a filmmaker. "I'm working on stories, yes," Keanu replied cautiously. The elderly man's face brightened. "Arc Productions. 3 years of development, not yet completed." He stated it as fact, not question. Keanu's interest peaked despite his wariness. "You follow independent film?" The man chuckled softly. "You could say that. I spent my life in it." He tapped his messenger bag. 50 years working with stories and images. Keanu studied the man more carefully now. He appeared authentic, not like a journalist fishing for insider information or an investor trying to leverage Keanu's current vulnerability. "I'm Hiroshi Yamamoto," the old man said, extending his hand across the space between their tables. Keanu's eyebrows rose. "Yamamoto? Any relation to Akira Kurosawa's Yamamoto?" Hiroshi smiled, clearly pleased. "Not by blood, no. But he was my mentor, my sensei for many years. In Japanese cinema's golden age, we all took immense pride in working alongside the emperor." Few people Keanu encountered casually would know about Kurosawa's longtime script supervisor and assistant director. His identity wasn't widely recognized outside serious film circles. "May I join you?" Hiroshi asked, gesturing toward the empty chair at Keanu's table. "I have something that might interest you." Every instinct told Keanu to decline. He had critical decisions to make. He didn't have time for distractions. But curiosity prevailed. Kurosawa was one of his cinematic heroes. "Please," Keanu said, gathering his papers to make room. Hiroshi moved to Keanu's table with surprising agility for his age, bringing his tea and messenger bag, placing them carefully on the wooden surface. "I have followed your work," Hiroshi said. "Arc Productions is very interesting company. Independent films with philosophical themes. We would never have imagined actors creating such spaces in my early days. It hasn't been easy, Keanu admitted. Nothing meaningful ever is. Hiroshi gestured toward the papers Keanu had been studying. Problems with the business? Keanu hesitated. He didn't typically discuss professional challenges with strangers. But something about this elderly filmmaker who had dedicated his life to the same artistic pursuits inspired unexpected trust. You could say that. We're facing significant obstacles. Hiroshi nodded knowingly. Filmmaking is difficult. Film business even more challenging. The entire industry thinks I'm overreaching, Keanu said. Maybe they're right. They said the same about Kurosawa-san, Hiroshi replied. When he proposed Rashomon after the war, many laughed. When he said he would film Seven Samurai with that unprecedented budget, they laughed harder. His eyes twinkled. But who laughed in the end, eh? Not them. For the first time that day, Keanu felt a small smile form. Did you work on Rashomon? Yes, yes. I was very young then. Just beginning. Hiroshi's face softened with the memory. The day it premiered, August 1950, was the greatest moment. We could not believe our eyes when we saw the finished film on screen. So simple yet so revolutionary, it changed everything. Keanu was fully engaged now, his own problems temporarily forgotten. What about Seven Samurai? Were you there during that production? Of course. April 1954. We were terrified something would go wrong. A film of that scale had never been attempted in Japan. The rain scenes alone nearly destroyed us. Hiroshi shook his head. Kurosawa-sensei, that's what we called him. He did not sleep for days before key sequences. When the final battle scene was successfully captured, Kurosawa wept openly. We all did. The café seemed to fade away as Hiroshi spoke. Keanu found himself transported to another time, another place, to the dawn of modern cinema when everything was new and the impossible was happening for the first time. But you didn't approach me to provide a film history lesson, Keanu said eventually. You mentioned having something that might interest me. Hiroshi nodded, his expression growing more serious. I have been watching your projects, your films, your motorcycle company too. You are attempting important things, things with meaning. He leaned forward. But now you are at a dangerous moment. I can see it in your face. The same expression Kurosawa had many times when our productions nearly collapsed. Keanu felt a strange sensation. How could this stranger read him so easily? I have experience with such moments, Hiroshi said quietly. Perhaps I can help. Keanu should have been suspicious, but something in the old man's eyes, a deep sincerity, a shared understanding of the impossible dreams they had both pursued, made him receptive. I'm not sure anyone can help with this particular dilemma, Keanu said. But I'm willing to listen to what you have to say. Hiroshi smiled warmly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He took a sip of his tea before speaking. Let me tell you about the early days, he began. Not the stories you read in books, the real stories. Hiroshi described how he joined the Japanese film industry as a young production assistant in 1950. He had studied at Tokyo University and displayed talent for visual composition. The recruitment had been unexpected, a producer from Toho Studios asking if he wanted to work on something meaningful in post-war Japan. We worked at Toho Studios outside Tokyo, Hiroshi said. Very modest by today's standards. Americans had no idea what cinematic revolution was brewing there. We worked 12, sometimes 16 hours every day. We were so young, so full of belief. Keanu found himself leaning forward, drawn into the narrative. He had read about these events but never heard them described by someone who had lived them. Kurosawa pushed us relentlessly, Hiroshi continued, always demanding better, more authentic work. But he pushed himself even harder. Many nights I found him sleeping at his desk, surrounded by storyboards. Being blacklisted during the American occupation had nearly broken his spirit, but it forged his will like tempered steel. Hiroshi's eyes grew distant as he recalled the premiere of Rashomon. We were terrified it would be rejected. Our first international festival submission had many technical compromises. But it worked. When the Venice Film Festival awarded us the Golden Lion, Kurosawa brought sake for everyone. The only time I ever saw him truly celebrate. He chuckled at the memory. Then his expression grew more somber. Then came the challenges. Poor Mifune-sen worked himself to exhaustion on Seven Samurai. 16-hour days in heavy armor, performing his own stunts. That bothered Kurosawa greatly. He cared deeply for his actors. When Mifune finally collapsed from exhaustion, Kurosawa insisted on personally taking him to the hospital, staying with him through the night to ensure he recovered. Keanu nodded. He understood that feeling the weight of responsibility for the well-being of those committed to your vision. Then came the battle with the studios for creative control, Hiroshi said, his voice quickening with emotion. Toho wanted to cut Seven Samurai by an hour. Said it was too long, too expensive. Kurosawa gathered us and declared, we must protect the integrity of the story. History will remember only what reaches the screen. And you prevailed, Keanu observed. Yes, but it was extremely close. We had to demonstrate why every scene mattered. Kurosawa made the decision to forfeit his salary to preserve the film's runtime. Hiroshi locked eyes with Keanu. Sometimes perfect is the enemy of good enough. Keanu felt the words resonate deeply. How many times had art productions delayed completion, seeking an unattainable perfection? What was it like during the filming of Ran? Keanu asked, referencing Kurosawa's epic late-career masterpiece. Extraordinary. Terrifying. Transcendent. Time seemed to stop during the castle siege sequence. When the crimson banners appeared on screen for the first time, grown men wept openly. For those weeks on location, there were no studio executives, no financial concerns, just pure artistic creation at its most profound level. The café had quieted as evening approached. A barista asked if they wanted refills. Both men nodded without interrupting their conversation. But there were tragedies too, Hiroshi continued after she left. His voice softened as he condensed years of painful history into a few measured sentences. Kurosawa's career nearly ended after Dodes Ka Den failed. The studios abandoned him, financiers lost faith, and he attempted suicide. The scars on his wrists remained visible until his death. Keanu nodded solemnly. I remember reading about that dark period. He endured 5 years of creative silence before Dersu Uzala, Hiroshi said. The Russians funded what Japanese studios wouldn't touch. He found a way forward when every door closed. Hiroshi's eyes carried the weight of these memories. He recounted the trials of Ran, the pain of rejection after decades of contribution, and the quiet dignity of his final films. All marked by compromise, but none by surrender. Keanu thought about the risks his own projects faced, about the responsibility he felt toward the artists and craftspeople whose talents he had assembled. The weight was immense. Keanu felt a chill. The parallel to his own situation was striking. Art productions had suffered financial setbacks and delays. Would his fourth attempt at establishing a meaningful independent production company be his last chance too? What did you do after that? Keanu asked. We adapted, Hiroshi replied simply. Could not make the films we originally envisioned. Fine. We built smaller, more intimate productions instead. Dreams, Rhapsody in August, and Matadeo, his final film. Learned to create within new constraints while Americans chased blockbusters. His voice carried no bitterness, just pragmatic acceptance. You know what we discovered? Hiroshi continued, eyes brightening. Failures taught us more than successes. Those studio rejections forced Kurosawa to develop new visual techniques. When traditional financing disappeared, we found international partners who respected artistic integrity above commercial formulas. Keanu nodded. It was a compelling perspective, failure as a pathway to innovation rather than an endpoint. Most important lesson Kurosawa taught us: failure is not the conclusion unless you surrender. After his suicide attempt, many believed his career was finished. The next day, those who remained loyal began developing new projects. He said, "Yesterday's rejection is today's motivation. Today's motivation is tomorrow's masterpiece." The cafe lights dimmed slightly, signaling closing time within the hour. Outside, darkness had fallen completely. "These are powerful stories," Keanu said genuinely. "But how does this help my situation?" Hiroshi's eyes twinkled mysteriously. "I have not revealed everything yet," he said, patting his messenger bag. "But first, tell me about your projects. What exactly challenges Arc Productions and Arch Motorcycle? I want to understand your struggles, not just share our old Japanese cinema trials." Keanu hesitated briefly before explaining the obstacles facing both ventures. For the first time that day, he felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps this unexpected conversation wasn't a distraction after all. Arc Productions is struggling with production delays and budget issues, Keanu explained. The film explores themes of grief, redemption, and reconnection, subjects deeply personal to me. But filming in Northern California has proven more complex than anticipated. Weather delays, permit complications, equipment failures, we've encountered every conceivable obstacle. Hiroshi nodded thoughtfully. First films are always hardest. What about your motorcycle company? Arch is facing different challenges, Keanu continued. We're building high-performance custom motorcycles unlike anything currently available, combining American performance with Japanese precision engineering. But our innovative engine design has encountered cooling issues during extended testing. Each prototype costs enormous amounts to build and test. His voice grew quieter. We've spent 4 years and over $7 million to reach this point. And funding is running out. So both ventures face termination, Hiroshi stated matter-of-factly. Keanu looked up, surprised by the directness. Yes. We're down to our final resources. If Arc's filming doesn't complete next month, or if Arch's prototype fails its upcoming demonstration, we're finished. Hiroshi was quiet for a moment, studying Keanu's face. Your projects represent only part of the story, I think. Tell me more about what motivates these endeavors. Keanu sighed. This was the complicated part. Arc and Arch both emerged from personal loss, he explained. After losing people close to me, I began questioning what creative legacy I wanted to leave behind. Mainstream Hollywood roles provided financial security but rarely allowed exploration of themes that matter deeply to me. He described how Arc Productions had started as an investment in developing meaningful independent films that explored profound human experiences, films that prioritized emotional authenticity over commercial formulas. The motorcycle company had grown from his passion for riding the freedom and clarity he found on two wheels during his darkest periods of grief. So you have two ventures, both consuming resources, both approaching simultaneous crisis, Hiroshi summarized. Exactly. And I've already invested nearly all my available funds. I have about $5 million remaining, not enough to save both. The weight of the admission hung in the air between them. Keanu had never stated it so directly, even to himself. He'd been searching for a magical solution that would rescue everything. But the truth was simple and brutal: one venture would need to be sacrificed so the other could survive. Why did you create these companies? Hiroshi asked suddenly. Was it for profit? You already had success from your acting career. No, it was never about money, Keanu said firmly. Hiroshi waited, watching him intently. When I was growing up in Toronto, I devoured every film I could find, Keanu continued. Kurosawa, Bergman, Tarkovsky, all the masters who explored the human condition. I believed in the power of storytelling to transform lives, to help people feel less alone in their struggles. His eyes grew distant with the memory. But as my acting career progressed, I realized that transformative, healing stories were becoming rarer. Studios prioritized franchises over personal narratives. The films that had saved me during my own darkest hours were disappearing. And Arch Motorcycle? Hiroshi prompted. That emerged from a different concern, Keanu explained. Motorcycle design had stagnated. Manufacturers were producing predictable machines that prioritized cost efficiency over innovation and craftsmanship. I wanted to create motorcycles that were mechanical art machines built with the same care and vision that go into meaningful films. Keanu described his realization that revolutionary ideas often required someone willing to take substantial risks that established companies avoided. Someone needed to demonstrate that independent films could explore profound themes while remaining accessible. And someone needed to prove that motorcycles could transcend utility to become expressions of design philosophy. So you decided to pursue both, Hiroshi said. Simultaneously. Keanu laughed softly. Sounds unreasonable when you phrase it that way. Not unreasonable, Hiroshi corrected. Ambitious. There is a distinction. The old man seemed to be contemplating something carefully. He took a small notebook from his bag and jotted down some notes. These challenges with your film, the location difficulties, the script revisions, I may have insights to offer. Kurosawa faced similar issues on nearly every production. Keanu's interest heightened. Really? Yes, but first I want to understand the complete situation. Show me exactly what you're confronting with both ventures. For the next 20 minutes, Keanu walked Hiroshi through the detailed financials. He explained the burn rates, development timelines, technological hurdles, and market pressures. It felt strangely liberating to be so transparent with a stranger. But something about Hiroshi inspired unusual confidence. So you see, Keanu concluded, I must choose. I can provide ARC Productions enough funding for one more month of filming and post-production, or I can keep Arch Motorcycle operating through its current design crisis. But not both. And which way are you leaning? Hiroshi asked softly. Keanu gazed out the window. I don't know. That's why I came here today to think. What does your heart suggest? My heart? Keanu appeared surprised by the question. My heart says preserve both. They're both pursuing ideas that matter for different reasons. And if you must select only one? Keanu remained silent for a long moment. ARC is closer to completion in some ways. One good month of production and we could have a finished film, something that might reach audiences, perhaps even influence other filmmakers. He ran a hand through his hair. But if it fails, if the film never reaches completion or finds distribution, everything we've captured becomes meaningless, locked away in a storage facility somewhere. His face darkened. And Arch needs more development time. But motorcycles are something everyone understands, something tangible. If we can just perfect the engine cooling system, demonstrate its capabilities to potential investors, other funding might materialize. A shadow crossed his features. But if Arch fails, the motorcycle industry will point to it for years as evidence that true innovation isn't commercially viable. Hiroshi nodded thoughtfully. Difficult choices. The worst aspect is the people, Keanu admitted. Dozens of talented artisans who believed in these visions enough to join startups when they could have had secure positions at major studios or established manufacturers. How do I tell half of them it's over? You care deeply about your teams, Hiroshi observed. Kurosawa was identical. When budget reductions came, he would fight vehemently to protect his collaborators. Keanu rubbed his tired eyes. Everyone thinks I'm overreaching. Industry insiders, financial advisors, even close friends. Personal challenges too, Hiroshi said sympathetically. They don't understand why I continue fighting when prospects appear so grim, Keanu said. We argue frequently. I've withdrawn from many friendships. The work consumes everything. He rarely discussed these personal struggles, but somehow sharing them with this man who had dedicated his own life to seemingly impossible artistic dreams felt appropriate. The isolation of leadership, Hiroshi said softly. Kurosawa experienced it profoundly. His marriage suffered. He missed much of his children's youth. The work devoured everything. Was it worth it? Keanu asked. Hiroshi considered the question carefully. For humanity, undoubtedly. The artistic legacy he created changed global cinema forever. He shrugged slightly. For Kurosawa personally, he died with regrets, as we all will. But he also died knowing he had advanced human artistic achievement. Few can claim this. Night had completely fallen outside. The cafe was nearly empty now. A barista wiped down nearby tables, giving them occasional glances. We should order something else, or they'll ask us to leave, Keanu said, reaching for his wallet. Hiroshi waved him off. I will purchase this. You can serve your funds for your projects. The small joke broke the tension, and Keanu found himself smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. After they ordered fresh drinks, Hiroshi reached for his weathered leather messenger bag. Now I believe it's time I showed you what I brought. The bag looked ancient. The leather was cracked in places, and the brass closures were tarnished with age. Hiroshi handled it with the reverence one might accord a precious artifact. I have preserved these items for many years, he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Very few individuals have seen them. He opened the clasp with a soft click. Keanu found himself leaning forward, curiosity overwhelming his exhaustion. Inside the bag were stacks of yellowed papers, vintage photographs, and what appeared to be screenplay annotations, all carefully protected in archival plastic sleeves. Hiroshi selected a photograph from the top and handed it to Keanu. Toho Studios, 1950. Day before Rashomon premiered, he said. The black and white image showed a group of men standing beside what looked like a camera setup. They were smiling, arms draped around each other's shoulders, appearing youthful and hopeful. Hiroshi pointed to one man in the center. That is Kurosawa-sensei, the master. The man had an intense presence, with penetrating eyes. Even in this moment of apparent celebration, he looked focused, determined. And that one, Hiroshi said, indicating a very young man at the edge of the group, that is me. Keanu studied the photograph with renewed interest. Young Hiroshi couldn't have been more than 22, with dark hair and the same perceptive eyes he still possessed. We had no certainty it would succeed, Hiroshi said. But observe our expressions. Such confidence we pretended to possess. He withdrew another photograph. This one showed a larger film set with elaborate period costumes. Seven Samurai, production, 1953. Largest set in Japanese film history at that time. Kurosawa was brilliant with historical authenticity. More photographs followed, Hiroshi with Toshiro Mifune, both in period costume. The construction of what Hiroshi identified as the castle set 4, Throne of Blood. A group of filmmakers hunched over a storyboard, cigarettes in hand, coffee cups scattered across the table. Then Hiroshi pulled out a photo that made Keanu inhale sharply. It showed the aftermath of what appeared to be a catastrophic film set accident, damaged equipment, destroyed sets, and dejected crew members. Major studio fire, 1971, Hiroshi said quietly. Destroyed nearly 6 months of work on Dodes Ka Den. He pointed to a figure whose posture communicated complete despair. That is me. Keanu felt a strange connection to that moment captured decades earlier. The crushing weight of creative devastation. He knew that feeling intimately. What happened afterward, he asked. We returned to work the following day, Hiroshi said simply. Kurosawa always said, yesterday is gone. Tomorrow awaits no one. Hiroshi's weathered hands rifled through more documents, storyboards and screenplay pages with handwritten notes in Japanese covering the margins. This is how progress materializes. Not in singular brilliant moments, but incrementally, mistake by mistake. He showed Keanu's sections with multiple revisions, original concepts crossed out and new solutions sketched over them. Keanu nodded, understanding completely. This mirrored the process at ARC Productions' constant refinement, learning from failures. Finally, Hiroshi reached deeper into his messenger bag and pulled out a small, worn notebook with a faded black leather cover. He handled it with particular reverence. This was Kurosawa's personal notebook, his private reflections and visualizations. Keanu's eyes widened. How did you acquire this? Hiroshi smiled enigmatically. After his death, many items were collected by museums. This, I preserved. An unofficial memento. He opened it carefully, revealing dense handwritten notes and sketch compositions. The handwriting was precise but rapid, as if the ideas were emerging faster than they could be recorded. These pages here, Hiroshi said, turning to a section marked with a blue tab, contain his thoughts on visual composition during moments of profound emotional transition, problems very similar to what you described with your ARC film. Keanu leaned forward, fascinated. Here were the private reflections of one of cinema's greatest visionaries, ideas that had never been published, innovations that had transformed the language of film itself. I've never seen anything like this, Keanu said, genuinely moved. This belongs in a museum. Perhaps someday, Hiroshi agreed. But right now, I believe it might serve you better. Keanu looked up, surprised. You mean? We will discuss that possibility, Hiroshi said with a gentle smile. First, let me show you what he wrote about capturing authentic emotion in seemingly impossible circumstances. I suspect you'll find it remarkably relevant. Hiroshi turned several pages until he found what he was looking for. Though Keanu couldn't read the Japanese text, the accompanying sketches of camera angles and actor positioning were clear. They showed how to visually represent internal conflict through external composition. Your third act transition is struggling with visual coherence, yes? Hiroshi asked. Keanu nodded, astonished. How did you know? The arc of grief to redemption requires precise visual language. Look here. He pointed to Kurosawa's drawings. Even though the notes were in Japanese, the storyboard-like sketches were unmistakable. They showed how to create visual motifs that would resonate throughout a narrative, providing both emotional continuity and transformation. Kurosawa tried many approaches, Hiroshi explained. First, contrasting light and shadow. Effective but overused. Then shifting perspective within scenes better, but still insufficient. Finally, he discovered something profound. Keanu leaned closer, transfixed by the diagrams. What was it? The answer lay not in the individual frame composition, but in the rhythmic relationship between sequences. The emotion exists not in any single image, but in the spaces between them, what he called ma, or negative space. Hiroshi flipped to another page. For your motorcycle design challenges, he would have seen similar principles at work. Form follows emotion, not just function. As they discussed each creative challenge, Keanu began to feel a growing sense of clarity. These weren't just theoretical discussions about filmmaking or design. These were practical solutions from someone who had faced and overcome similar obstacles throughout a legendary career. For the first time in months, both of his ventures' challenges seemed potentially surmountable. "You've given me much to consider," Keanu said finally. Hiroshi closed the notebook and looked Keanu directly in the eyes. "Technical problems have technical solutions. That is the simpler part." "And the harder part?" Keanu asked. "Knowing which mountain is worth climbing," Hiroshi replied, tapping a napkin where he had sketched two simple diagrams side by side. On one side he had written arc with two branches, success equals cultural impact, and failure equals personal disappointment. On the other side he had written arch with branches reading success equals industry transformation, and failure equals setback for innovation. He pushed the napkin toward Keanu. Both significant, but with different risks, different rewards. Hiroshi reached into his messenger bag again and withdrew a folded piece of paper that appeared even older than the other documents, the creases deep from years of careful preservation. "This is a letter Kurosawa wrote in 1970, Hiroshi explained, after the studio threatened to cancel his contract completely. They wanted to force him into retirement. They wanted to end his career." Keanu asked, surprised. "After everything he'd accomplished?" Hiroshi nodded solemnly. "Success is never as secure as it appears. There were many in the industry who considered him outdated, too expensive, too uncompromising in his vision. In that small cafe, it wasn't just financial reports or legendary advice that shaped Keanu's path. It was the reminder that greatness is often forged in moments of solitude, doubt, and quiet courage. So tell us, what would you choose if you had to save just one dream? Comment 1 for arc, 2 for arch, and share your reason below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another story that might just change your day or your life. Because here at Motivation for Success, we believe that every choice, every challenge, is a chance to rise.